YouTube, once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast. We're talking Auburn football. Go ahead and like the video, comment, and subscribe. Now, when I talk about subscribe, I mean click the bell twice so that you will receive the notifications when Vernon Speaks Sports comes on talking about these Auburn Tigers. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle. Of course, we know about the offensive line woes for the Auburn Tigers and, pretty much lacking the typical offensive production that we tend to expect out of the Auburn Tigers. We're accustomed to Auburn being able to run the football. And that's something that has not happened, at least here in the last couple of years. Kerryon Johnson brought the Auburn running game back to life in 2017, but it's been pretty I wouldn't say non-existent, because Boobie Whitlow, I would say, if not for injury, would have been at least a 1,000-yard rusher at Auburn. But injuries was a factor. And if you look at Boobie Whitlow, he wasn't recruited as a running back. He made some really good strides during the offseason of 2017, turned some heads, and wound up being the starting running back over the past few years, 2018, 2019. But Auburn has still lacked that, that real traditional dominant rusher. Not necessarily the Brad Lesters or the Kenny Irons or the Carnell Williams, Ronnie Browns that we've become accustomed to and Trey Mason, Peyton Barber. You can continue to name names of great running backs at Auburn, but that hasn't been the case over the last 2 years. Most of us suspect that the lack of offensive production has come to fruition because of the lack of probably a lack of a combination of things. One, maybe there's some developmental things in place. Also, there could be just a lack of talent. If you look at Auburn's offensive line recruits over the last few years, the highest rated recruit, .93, Cameron Stutes is the highest rated recruit. Everyone else falls in that middle to lower end 3-star recruit for the Auburn Tigers. So Auburn has gone out and they're continuing to try to, really piece together this offensive line for the 2020 football season. So they took advantage of a graduate transfer out of the Akron Zips in Brandon Council. So I'll go ahead and warn you, this is not necessarily the home run recruit that a lot of folks are wanting out of Auburn. But what I'm looking at here is Auburn is hoping to supplement Brandon Council's experience over even his initial recruitment, because he wound up out of he was a high school player in North Carolina, wound up at the Akron Zips as a 2-star recruit. The possible good thing about this is that the Akron Zips are typically a punching bag for pay football team. They frequent Power 5 teams, like teams out of the Power 5. Teams out of the Big Ten, because they are located in Ohio, so they're positioned right in there. So they, help to fill schedules for the Power 5 teams up there. They come down to the South every now and then, play some teams for homecoming. So if you look at Brandon Council, they've been to a bowl game during his tenure, but pretty much not accustomed to winning on a high level. But he's had that Power 5 experience. He's played against some pretty good teams, Wisconsin, some of the guys in that Big Ten conference, that gives him some looks as to what elite talent can be like, competing against elite talent. How will that transfer over to Auburn? Well, for one, Auburn's got a lot of catching up to do when it comes to offensive line recruits, as does Auburn have this same thing to catch up with when it comes to secondary. Auburn hasn't done a great job in recruiting boundary cornerbacks. There have been a lot of position changes to that position. You talk about Noah Igbenogany, who was recruited as a wide receiver, transferred, made the position change to cornerback, easily one of the best position changes in recent history. I think about past position changes that have proven big for Auburn. You think about Jay Ratliff from the middle 2000s, who was a tight end, but made the transition to defensive end, had a nice career in the NFL. Noah Igbenogany, like I said before, he's probably going to be a first-round pick. Now, I don't think this is going to be, when we talk about Brandon Council, one thing that we want to look for is, one, he's really big. He's 6'5", 300 pounds, hoping that with Jack Bicknell as the offensive line coach, that he can coach some physicality, that he can coach some push down the football field that Auburn has lacked in the last 2 years under J.B. Grimes. These guys are big. These guys are athletic, but they can't move the line of scrimmage, even against menial opponents. Because we look at the game against Tulane, for example. Now, don't get me wrong, Tulane came into the 2019 season as listed as one of the top 10 defensive lines in the country, but you still expect a Power 5 football team like the Auburn Tigers, who expects to compete for the SEC West every year, who expects to go to the SEC championship at least once every 2 or 3 years. You don't expect an offensive line from a Power 5 football team in the SEC to struggle as they did with some of the teams that they struggle with. Lack of chemistry, lack of unity, lack of physicality up front. What Auburn can hope to gain from a guy like Brandon Council, obviously, is the experience. And to give the Auburn Tigers, because they're so far behind with recruiting at the offensive line position, give them some more looks, give them some more guys to be able to choose from, to piece together this offensive line to get some level of improvement, because you got the skilled players there at this point. You talk about Tank Bigsby, you talk about DJ Williams, you talk about upgrades at the wide receiver position with Xavion Capers, and Zach Farrar, I think, will play a nice part in this. And then you also have Anthony Schwartz, who will be coming back. Eli Stove is coming back from his senior year, garnished the extra year of eligibility because of an injury. So Auburn has the skill players in place. But if you don't have an offensive line that can really push the envelope, that can really be dominant up front on some kind of level, Auburn is still going to be that 8-5, 9-4 football team. And that's what Auburn is really looking for. But when you talk about recruiting, though, Jack Bicknell has already gotten off to a good start, at least targeting some of the high-end recruits. I don't think he's going to get them yet, but at least targeting these types of recruits. But Auburn's got to win. 2020 has to be a year that Auburn makes an impression, that Auburn wins the big football games and be able to recruit more high-end recruits, especially in the SEC, Power 5 football. You gotta win in the trenches. And that's something that Auburn has not done in the last few years. 2018, 2019, non-existent. Auburn gets in the red zone, they got to get creative. And you know when you get in the red zone, the passing window starts to close. The defensive line actually has a little bit more leverage because there's not a lot of space. And Auburn trying to do these end around and do all of these slow developing plays down in the red zone just is not that's been somewhat of the difference in their success over the past few years. I hope Brandon Council turns out to be an asset to the Tigers. He's very big, 6'5", 300 pounds. Hopefully he has the athleticism to actually help Auburn to supplement this offensive line as far as from an experience standpoint. But that is yet to be seen. Once again, it's Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast, Talking Auburn Football. Go ahead and like the video, comment, and subscribe. And as always, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, War Eagle.